I am Joshua, 32 years old, and I woke up on the most important morning of my life to find half of my face completely paralyzed by my own flesh and blood. Before I tell you about the brutal courtroom showdown that ripped my family apart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The morning started like any other. My alarm went off at exactly 5:30. I had a routine. I had a system. Today was the day I was going to secure the promotion to Senior Marketing Director at Brennan Industries. It was the culmination of 8 brutal years of 80-hour work weeks, missed holidays, and sacrificed relationships. I reached over to turn off the alarm, and that is when I felt the first wave of wrongness. My face felt heavy. Not the heavy you feel from a bad night of sleep, but a thick, rubbery deadness that seemed to pull my skin down toward the mattress. I rubbed my eyes, or at least I tried to. My left eye would not close all the way. A cold spike of pure panic hit my chest. I threw the blankets off and practically ran to the bathroom, my bare feet slapping against the cold hardwood floor. I flipped the light switch. The fluorescent bulb flickered to life, and I looked into the mirror. The reflection staring back at me did not belong to me. The entire left side of my face was frozen, drooping downward like melted wax. The corner of my mouth hung open, a thin trail of saliva pooling there because I physically could not pull my lips together. My forehead was completely smooth and rigid as a sheet of plastic. I tried to raise my eyebrows. Only the right one moved, shooting up in a frantic arc while the left side remained dead. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out of my throat was a distorted, wet gargle. The bathroom door swung open, hitting the wall with a loud thud. My older brother, Carter, leaned against the doorframe. He was 34, dressed in a designer silk shirt, his hair perfectly styled. He had that arrogant, empty smirk on his face, the one he always wore when he thought he had won something. In his right hand, he held a medical syringe. It was completely empty. "Surprise," Carter said, his voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. He twirled the empty syringe between his fingers like a miniature baton. "Now we're equally handsome." I grabbed the edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white. I tried to ask him what he did to me, but my jaw refused to articulate the words. It sounded like I had a mouth full of marbles. Right behind him, my mother pushed her way into the small bathroom. She was already dressed for the day, wearing her pearls and a bright, beaming smile that made my stomach turn. She actually brought her hands together and clapped. It was a sharp, festive sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. "Oh, Joshua, look at you," my mother said, stepping past Carter to look at my ruined face in the mirror. "He spent his entire bonus on you. $3,000 worth of premium injectables from the clinic. The least you could do is say thank you." My father appeared in the hallway, holding a cup of coffee. He took a slow sip, looking at me with the same mild amusement he reserved for watching a dog chase its own tail. "Better start getting ready and smile," my father said, chuckling at his own joke. "Your interview is in 2 hours. You don't want to look grumpy for the big bosses." I stared at them, my own family. I looked at Carter, the golden child who worked the reception desk at a high-end med spa for wealthy men, playing the role of a lifestyle influencer on social media. I looked at my mother, who had always treated Carter like a prince and me like the hired help. I looked at my father, who enabled every single piece of this toxic dynamic. They had broken into my apartment. They had a spare key for emergencies, a key I was currently cursing myself for giving them. Carter had sneaked into my bedroom while I was dead asleep and injected my face with a massive dose of stolen chemicals. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The left side of my vision started to blur because I could not blink away the dryness. I pointed a shaking finger at the hallway. I gathered every ounce of air in my lungs and forced the words past my paralyzed lips. "Get out," came out slurred, thick, and ugly. My mother's smile vanished instantly. Her eyes narrowed into resentful slits. "Excuse me? Are you seriously throwing a tantrum right now? Your brother stayed up all night planning this to help you look presentable for once. You always look so tired and stressed. We try to help your career, and this is the thanks we get. You ruined my face? I managed to force out, the effort making my throat burn. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Carter scoffed, tossing the empty syringe into my trash can. It will settle in a few days. You needed it. Your skin was a disaster. Consider it an early Christmas gift. We are leaving, my father announced, turning his back. Let him wallow in his ungratefulness. Come on, Eleanor. Come on, Carter. They walked out. I heard the front door open and slam shut, the lock clicking into place. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood alone in the bright bathroom, staring at the monster in the mirror. I reached up and touched my cheek. Felt numb, alien. I walked out of the bathroom and looked at my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up. 7:30. The final interview panel with the CEO of Brennan Industries was scheduled for 9. I had 2 hours. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking beneath my weight. I stared at the blank screen of the phone, my mind racing backward, thinking about everything it took to get to this exact moment, and how my brother had just taken a match and burned it all to the ground. To understand why this hurt so much, why the sight of that empty syringe felt like a knife twisting in my gut, you have to understand the 32 years that led up to this morning. In our house, there was only one son, and his name was Carter. Everything revolved around him. Growing up, if Carter wanted to play baseball, my parents bought him the best gear, hired private coaches, and traveled across the state for his tournaments. When I brought home straight A's and a debate team trophy, my mother would barely glance at it before telling me to keep my voice down so Carter could rest before his big game. The disparity hit its absolute peak when it was time for college. I had worked through high school, saving every penny from bagging groceries and mowing lawns. I thought I had a college fund. That was what my parents had always told me. But when the tuition bills came due, my father sat me down at the kitchen table and cleared his throat. We had to reallocate some assets, Joshua, he said, not meeting my eyes. Reallocate to what? I had asked. The answer arrived in our driveway the very next day. A brand new, sleek black Porsche. My parents had drained my college fund to buy Carter a luxury sports car because he had just landed a job as a client relations manager, which was a fancy word for a front desk receptionist, at an elite cosmetic med spa. My mother insisted that Carter needed to project an image of wealth and success to fit in with his wealthy clients. My education was deemed less important than my brother's aesthetic. I did not argue. I packed my bags, took out a mountain of student loans, and moved out. I swore to myself that I would build a life so solid, so undeniable, that their favoritism would never be able to touch me again. That was how I ended up at Brennan Industries. I started at the absolute bottom. I was the intern fetching coffee, organizing file cabinets, and staying until midnight to double-check spreadsheets that nobody else wanted to look at. While Carter was busy building his social media presence, taking selfies with the Porsche and buying fake followers to boost his influencer status, I was grinding my way up the corporate ladder. From intern to associate, from associate to account manager, from account manager to regional lead. I sacrificed everything. I missed my best friend's wedding because of a product launch. I ended a 3-year relationship because I simply did not have the time to be a decent partner. My entire identity was wrapped up in the work, and it was finally paying off. The senior marketing director position opened up. It was a massive promotion. We are talking about a salary that would instantly wipe out the last of my student debt. It came with stock options, a corner office, and real executive power. I spent 6 months preparing. I went through 3 grueling rounds of preliminary interviews. I built a 100-page portfolio detailing a 3-year growth strategy for the company. I was the front runner. I knew it, and Mr. Brennan, the CEO, knew it. The final interview today was supposed to be a formality, a final handshake to welcome me to the executive board. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. 8 o'clock. 1 hour left. I walked over to the mirror in the bedroom and tried to practice speaking. Good morning, Mr. Brennan. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. The words that left my mouth were a garbled, slurring mess. The paralysis was getting worse. The Botox was fully settling into the muscle tissue. The left side of my jaw felt locked in place. I tried to stretch my mouth, massaging my cheek with my fingers, trying desperately to wake the nerves up. Nothing worked. It felt like I was rubbing a piece of thick rubber. I realized with a sickening drop in my stomach that I could not go into that boardroom. I looked like a stroke victim, and worse, I sounded completely incomprehensible. If I walked in there looking and sounding like this, I would not project leadership. I would project chaos. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice on the carpet before I could unlock the screen. I found the contact for the executive HR coordinator, who handled Mr. Brennan's schedule. I hit the call button. The phone rang. 1 ring. 2 rings. Every second stretched out into an eternity. I paced the floor, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to figure out how to explain that my brother had assaulted me with cosmetic chemicals without sounding absolutely insane. Executive office. This is Sarah. A crisp, professional voice answered. I squeezed my eyes shut. Well, one eye shut, and took a deep breath. Sarah, hi. This is Joshua, I said. Or at least that is what I tried to say. What actually came through the phone was a thick, dragging sound. Thara, hi. Fifth is Yoshua. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The typing sound in the background stopped. Joshua, is that you? The line is a bit muffled. I need to reschedule, I forced out, pushing every syllable through my teeth. The drool at the corner of my mouth spilled over, and I wiped it away furiously with the back of my hand. Medical emergency. Another pause. This one felt heavier. Joshua, are you okay? You sound strange. Are you in a safe place? Before I could answer, another voice came on the line. It was Mr. Brennan. He must have been standing right next to Sarah's desk. Joshua? It's David Brennan. What is going on? We are expecting you in the boardroom in 45 minutes. The entire committee is here. Mr. Brennan? I tried to speak slowly, clearly, fighting the dead weight of my own face. I had an incident. Medical. I cannot speak properly. Face paralyzed. Need to postpone. The silence from the CEO of my company was the loudest sound I had ever heard. When he finally spoke, his tone was completely altered. The warmth was gone. It was replaced by a cold, sharp edge. Joshua, listen to me carefully, Mr. Brennan said. Are you intoxicated? The question hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. No, sir. Botox. My brother. I sounded frantic, desperate, and drunk. The more I panicked, the less control I had over my tongue. This is unacceptable. Mr. Brennan cut me off. The disappointment in his voice was crushing. This position requires someone who can handle pressure, not someone who calls in an hour before the final panel sounding like they just left a bar. We needed immediate availability for this role. If you cannot make this interview today, we have to move forward with the other candidates. Please, I begged, the words sliding into a pathetic slur. I am sorry, Joshua. We will contact you next week regarding your current position. Goodbye. The line went dead. The dial tone buzzed against my ear. I lowered the phone. 8 years. Thousands of hours of overtime. The promotions, the salary I dreamed of, the escape from my family's shadow. Gone. Evaporated in a single 3-minute phone call. I sat on the edge of my bed. For a long time, I didn't move. The grief was so heavy it felt like it was crushing my lungs. But then, somewhere deep in my chest, the grief hardened, crystallized into something cold, sharp, and intensely focused. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up. I walked into the living room, grabbed my ring light from the closet, and set it up. I mounted my phone on the tripod. I hit record. I spent the next 20 minutes documenting everything. I took close-up photos of the injection marks on my forehead, around my eyes, and near my jawline. Tiny red pinpricks where Carter had pierced my skin. I recorded a video of myself trying to speak, trying to smile, trying to blink. I created a time-stamped, undeniable record of exactly what had been done to me. Then, I grabbed my car keys, put on a medical mask and sunglasses to hide my face, and drove straight to the hospital. The emergency room was packed, but the moment the triage nurse pulled down my mask, she immediately rushed me into an examination room. 10 minutes later, Dr. Matthew, the attending physician, walked in. He was a tall man with tired eyes, but as he examined my face, his exhaustion was replaced by absolute horror. "Who did this to you?" Dr. Matthew asked, his gloved fingers gently pressing the injection sites. "My brother," I answered, writing it down on a notepad the nurse had given me to avoid the strain of speaking. While I was sleeping, Dr. Matthew actually dropped his pen. It clattered against the linoleum floor. He stared at the notepad, then back up at me. "Are you telling me this was done without your consent?" "Unconscious." I nodded. He took a step back, crossing his arms. "The placement of these injections is completely erratic. Whoever did this had zero medical training. Joshua, if this needle had hit the wrong facial artery, or if it had migrated into your central nervous system, you could have gone into respiratory failure. Based on the paralysis spread, the dosage here is easily 3 times the safe cosmetic amount. This is a massive overdose of botulinum toxin." Dr. Matthew leaned over the bed, his voice dropping to a deadly serious whisper. "This is assault. You need to file a police report immediately. I am going to document everything for your medical file. We need to monitor you for the next few hours to ensure the toxin does not spread to your throat muscles." As I sat there with an 4 in my arm, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Joshua, this is Dr. Julian from the med spa. Your parents called me in a panic. Let's keep this between us. I can wire $50,000 to your account today for your trouble. Do not involve the authorities. Let's be smart about this." I stared at the screen. My parents had called his boss. They were trying to buy my silence to protect Carter. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the message, backed it up to my cloud drive, pulled the 4 from my arm after the doctor cleared me, and walked out of the hospital doors directly to the police station. The police station smelled like stale coffee, sweat, and cheap floor cleaner. I sat in a hard plastic chair in the interview room across from Detective Torres. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had probably seen every shade of human depravity. But as she read the medical report Dr. Matthew had sent over, her jaw tightened. "Let me get this completely straight," Detective Torres said, tapping her pen against the metal desk. "Your brother, who is not a licensed medical professional, used a key your parents hold, entered your home, and injected a controlled medical substance into your face while you were unconscious?" I nodded, sliding my phone across the table. I played the video I had recorded that morning. I showed her the text message from Dr. Julian offering the bribe. Detective Torres leaned back in her chair, a dark expression crossing her face. "Mr. Morrison, what you are describing isn't a family prank. This is assault with a deadly weapon. It's breaking and entering. It is practicing medicine without a license. And if he took those vials from his workplace, it is felony theft of a controlled substance." She looked me dead in the eye. "If you press charges, we will arrest him. This will go to trial. There is no turning back. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes." I forced the word out. It sounded ugly, but the conviction behind it was absolute. Torres nodded. "Good. I am going to send an officer to the med spa right now to secure their inventory logs before they can doctor the books." While I was sitting in the station filling out the formal complaint, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number, but the text made it clear who it was. "Joshua, it's Chloe, the nurse from the clinic. I saw Carter taking vials from the secure fridge last night after closing. I took photos of the inventory log before Dr. Julian got here this morning. I'm sending them to you. I can't let them cover this up." The puzzle pieces were locking into place perfectly. I forwarded the screenshots to Detective Torres. When I finally walked out of the police station, the afternoon sun was blinding. I sat in my car in the parking lot and took a deep breath. The police were handling the criminal side, but I knew my brother. I knew his world, Carter's entire existence, his self-worth, his income. It was all tied to his pristine, curated social media image. He had 50,000 followers who thought he was a wellness guru living his best life in a Porsche. It was time to introduce his followers to reality. I drove home. I sat at my dining room table, opened my laptop, and pulled up my social media accounts. I did not have a massive following, but I had enough connections in the corporate marketing world, and I knew how algorithms worked. I selected the most brutal, unflattering photo I took that morning. The one where my face was severely drooping, the injection sites bruised and red, my eye watering helplessly. I uploaded the photo. I didn't write a long, emotional essay. I kept it cold, precise, and completely factual. The caption read, "When your brother breaks into your apartment and injects you with a lethal dose of stolen Botox while you sleep to make you equally handsome 2 hours before the biggest job interview of your life. He cost me my career. The police are handling the rest." I tagged Carter's influencer account. I tagged the med spa. I tagged Dr. Julian. I added the hashtags for cosmetic safety and local news outlets. My finger hovered over the mouse pad. Once I clicked publish, the war was going to go public. My family would be exposed. There would be no quiet Sunday dinners ever again. I clicked publish. Then, I forwarded the formal police report, along with Chloe's inventory photos, directly to Dr. Julian's professional email, copying the state medical licensing board. I sat back and watched the screen. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. A few confused comments from former coworkers. But then the algorithm caught it. A prominent anti-botch surgery advocate with 1 million followers retweeted my post. My phone started vibrating violently. Notifications flooded the screen. 10 comments turned into 100. 100 turned into 1,000. People were outraged, horrified, and tagging local authorities. Then the phone calls started. First, it was my mother. I watched her name flash on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Voicemail. Then Carter. I answered that one. I put it on speaker. "Are you insane?" Carter's voice was shrill, completely stripped of its usual arrogance. He sounded like a cornered rat. "Take the post down. Take it down right now, Joshua. Dr. Julian just fired me. The police are here at the clinic pulling the security tapes. You are ruining my life. You ruined my face," I said, my slurred voice cold and steady. "And you ruined my career. Now we are equal." I hung up. I blocked his number. I blocked my parents. I walked into the bathroom, looked at my twisted, paralyzed face in the mirror, and for the first time that day, I felt a genuine sense of peace. The storm was here, and I was the one driving the winds. The internet moves with terrifying speed when it smells blood. Within 48 hours, the story had exploded beyond anything I could have engineered. It wasn't just a local scandal anymore. It was a national viral sensation. Botox brother assault was trending. Carter's life was dismantled piece by piece in the public square. His followers turned on him instantly, flooding his perfectly curated photos with disgust. The boutique fitness brands that sponsored him publicly severed their contracts. The med spa, terrified of losing its medical license, issued a public statement condemning Carter and announcing they were pressing their own felony theft charges against him. For 3 days, Carter was the internet's most hated person. It is an eternity in social media time. My parents managed to bypass my blocked numbers by calling me from a prepaid phone. When I answered, my mother shrieked so loudly the speaker cracked. "You are destroying your brother's life over a misunderstanding," she screamed, her voice breaking. "He was trying to help you. You can get another job, Joshua, but Carter is facing jail time. How can you do this to your own blood? Can I get another face while he is in prison?" I asked, my voice flat. "Prison? Don't be ridiculous." My father grabbed the phone. "We will hire the best lawyer in the state. We will crush you in court if you don't drop this. Assault with a deadly weapon carries 5 to 10 years. I replied. "See you in court." I hung up. The trial was swift. The evidence was an absolute avalanche. The criminal justice system does not care about family dynamics. It cares about facts. And the facts were damning. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, wearing a sharp suit. My face was still partially paralyzed, requiring me to dab the corner of my mouth with a handkerchief occasionally. Across the aisle sat my parents, holding hands, looking aged and terrified. Carter sat at the defense table wearing a cheap suit. He looked small, pale, and stripped of all his false bravado. Carter's defense attorney was a slick, expensive lawyer my parents had clearly drained their savings to hire. He tried to spin a ridiculous narrative. He paced in front of the jury, painting Carter as a misguided but loving brother who made a stupid mistake out of a desperate desire to boost my confidence. It was a prank gone wrong, the lawyer argued smoothly. A foolish attempt to give his hard-working brother a glow-up. There was no malice, no intent to harm. The jury looked skeptical, but the defense was fighting hard to reduce the charges to a simple misdemeanor. Then it was the prosecution's turn. The district attorney stood up. She did not yell. She did not pace. She simply walked over to the AV cart and plugged in a flash drive. The defense claims there was no malice, the prosecutor said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. The defense claims this was an act of brotherly love. I would like the jury to see the defendant's own definition of love. She pressed play. A video appeared on the large screens facing the jury box. It was footage the police cyber unit had recovered from Carter's deleted iCloud files. He had filmed it on his phone in my dark bedroom, right before he injected me. In the video, the camera is pointed at Carter's face. He is grinning, eyes gleaming with sheer malice. He whispers into the microphone, "My genius brother thinks he's so much better than me with his fancy corporate job. Let's see how far that big brain gets him when he can't even move his stupid face to speak." The camera then pans down to me, fast asleep, vulnerable, trusting the safety of my own home. Carter's hand comes into frame, holding the needle, pressing it into my skin. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. I heard someone in the gallery mutter, "Monster." I looked over at my parents. My mother had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My father was staring at the floor, his face drained of all color. The illusion was shattered. They could no longer pretend this was an accident. They had just watched their golden child gleefully plot my destruction. Carter buried his face in his hands on the defense table. His expensive lawyer stopped taking notes and just stared at the screen, knowing the case was entirely dead. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The judge asked the foreman to read the verdict. On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of breaking and entering, guilty. On the charge of practicing medicine without a license, guilty. The judge slammed the gavel. Carter was handcuffed right there in the courtroom. As the bailiffs led him away, he looked back at my parents, sobbing, begging them to do something. They just sat there, frozen. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. I had won the battle. This is a moment that changed everything, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please help me like the video and leave a comment with the number 1 below so I know you've been with me this far. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The criminal trial put Carter behind bars, but the justice system was not done with the Morrison family. The very next week, I filed a massive civil suit. I didn't do it out of greed. I did it because my life had a price tag attached to it. The medical bills for the extensive physical therapy to rehabilitate my facial nerves were astronomical. Furthermore, I had documented proof from Brennan Industries that I lost a massive salary increase and executive stock options directly because of the assault. I sued Carter, and I sued the med spa for negligence in securing their inventory. The med spa settled out of court instantly for a substantial sum, terrified of the PR nightmare continuing. But Carter had no money. His influencer lifestyle was a house of cards built on debt and fake sponsorships. That meant the financial liability fell back onto the people who had funded and enabled his toxic existence from day one, my parents. During the discovery phase of the civil suit, my lawyer subpoenaed my parents' financial records to see if they had been hiding any of Carter's assets. What my lawyer uncovered was the final, sickening twist in my family's history. I sat in my lawyer's office, looking at the banking documents spread across the mahogany desk. "Joshua," my lawyer said gently, "your parents are broke. They have been broke for a very long time." "What do you mean?" I asked, carefully sipping water so it wouldn't spill from the weak side of my mouth. "They have a massive retirement fund. They own a huge house." "They don't own the house," my lawyer corrected, sliding a piece of paper toward me. 10 years ago, they took out a massive second mortgage on the property, and they liquidated their entire 401k. I looked at the date on the mortgage documents. It was the exact same month I was starting college. The exact same month my father told me my college fund had been reallocated. "They didn't just drain your college fund to buy Carter that Porsche," I realized out loud, my voice tight. "They remortgaged their home. They gambled their entire financial future to buy him a sports car and fund his fake lifestyle." "And now," my lawyer added, "they used whatever scraps of credit they had left to pay for his criminal defense attorney. If we proceed with the civil judgment to garnish Carter's future wages and seize his remaining assets, your parents' house will be foreclosed by the bank within 60 days. They will have nothing." My lawyer looked at me, giving me an out. "You have every right to take every penny, but it will destroy them financially." That night, my doorbell rang. I opened the door. My parents stood on the porch in the pouring rain. They didn't have umbrellas. They looked soaked, pathetic, and utterly broken. My mother's pearls were gone. My father looked 10 years older. "Joshua," my father pleaded, his voice cracking, "please, let us in." I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. "Say what you need to say from there." My mother burst into tears. "Please drop the civil suit. We are begging you. The bank sent the foreclosure notice today. We are going to lose the house. Carter is in jail. You have your revenge. Hasn't this family suffered enough?" I looked at the woman who had clapped her hands in delight while my face hung paralyzed. I looked at the man who laughed and told me to smile for my interview while I was internally suffocating. "You are not my family," I said, my voice finally clear, the paralysis almost entirely gone now. "You are just people I happen to share DNA with. A family doesn't drain a college fund to buy a Porsche. A family doesn't clap when you are disfigured. And a family certainly doesn't hire a lawyer to protect the attacker and destroy the victim." "Joshua, he is your brother," my mother wailed. "He was," I corrected coldly. "Now he is a convict. You made your choices for 32 years. Now the bill is due. I am not dropping the suit." I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I didn't look out the window as they walked away into the rain. I walked into my kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and slept soundly for the first time in months. The storm was finally over. The wreckage was cleared. It was time to build something new. A full year passed since the gavel fell in that courtroom. Let me tell you, healing is not a movie montage where everything gets magically better in a 3-minute pop song. Healing is brutal. It is slow. It is waking up every single morning, staring at the bathroom mirror, and actively choosing not to let hatred completely consume your soul. For the first 3 months, my life was a relentless, exhausting cycle of medical appointments and intensive physical therapy. The massive, unregulated dose of Botox my brother injected into my face had severely traumatized my facial nerves. I had to literally relearn how to use my own muscles. My best friend, Nathan, was my absolute rock during this dark time. He took time off his own job to drive me to the clinic twice a week when the nerve medication made me too dizzy and nauseous to sit behind the wheel. I spent hundreds of hours sitting in a sterile, white-walled room, hooked up to a complex biofeedback machine. The physical therapist would attach tiny, cold electrodes to my cheeks, my forehead, and my jawline. I had to sit in front of a mirror and concentrate with all my might just to make my left eyelid twitch. I had to practice smiling like a toddler learning to walk. Every single millimeter of movement was a hard-fought victory that left me sweating and physically drained. Sometimes, I would just sit in the clinic parking lot after a session and scream out of sheer frustration, the sound muffled by the thick windows of my car. But as the months dragged on, the toxins finally began to metabolize and leave my system. My face slowly started to wake up. The heavy drooping disappeared. My jaw finally unlocked, allowing me to chew solid food without pain. My speech returned to its normal, crisp cadence, leaving behind the slurred, heavy sounds that had cost me my career. By the 6-month mark, unless you knew exactly what to look for, you would never know I had been chemically paralyzed by my own flesh and blood. And then, just as I was getting my physical life back on track and preparing to send out my resume to new firms, the professional world handed me the ultimate plot twist. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking black coffee and reviewing my portfolio, when my cell phone vibrated against the wood. The caller ID flashed a name I honestly thought I would never see again. David Brennan, the CEO of Brennan Industries. The man who had coldly hung up on me when I sounded intoxicated during my medical emergency. I stared at the screen for a long time. I let it ring 3 times. I took a deep breath, making sure my posture was straight even though he couldn't see me, ensuring my voice was completely steady, and answered. "This is Joshua Morrison." "Joshua, it is David Brennan. I am calling to offer you a profound, unqualified apology." His voice sounded entirely different from that cold morning a year ago. He sounded exhausted, humbled, and deeply regretful. I leaned back in my wooden chair, crossing my arms. "I am listening, Mr. Brennan." He let out a heavy sigh and went on to explain the absolute disaster that had unfolded at his company over the past 8 months. The man they had hired for the senior marketing director position instead of me, the guy who was supposed to be the safe, immediate, perfect choice, had just been escorted out of the corporate building in handcuffs by federal authorities. He had been caught aggressively embezzling company funds and fabricating quarterly financial reports to cover his tracks. In their frantic rush to fill the position after my forced withdrawal, the executive board had completely skipped the deep dive background check. "We made a catastrophic error in judgment, Joshua," Mr. Brennan admitted over the phone, his tone heavy with corporate regret. "And I made a severe personal error in how I handled your medical emergency. I saw the news articles about your brother's criminal trial. I saw the police reports. I saw what your family did to you. It was unconscionable. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt after your 8 years of flawless, dedicated service to this firm." He paused, and the silence stretched for a few seconds before he delivered the words that changed the trajectory of my career forever. "The senior director position is vacant. The board of directors and I had a long meeting this morning. We want you back. We need you to fix the massive mess this fraudster left behind in the department. And we are willing to highly compensate you for the delay and the mishandling of your situation. A year ago, I would have jumped out of my chair and accepted immediately out of pure gratitude. But I was not that man anymore. I had survived the absolute worst betrayal imaginable. I had the leverage now, and I knew exactly how to use it. Mr. Brennan, I appreciate the transparency," I said, my voice completely level. "But returning to fix another man's criminal mistakes requires a different level of commitment. I want the promotion to senior director, yes, but I require a starting salary that is 30% higher than the original offer. I want a comprehensive signing bonus to cover the income one lost over the past year. I need an ironclad severance package written into my contract, and full executive stock options starting on day 1. There was a brief hesitation on the line, the sound of a CEO weighing the cost of his mistakes. "You drive a hard bargain, Joshua, but given the circumstances and your track record, you have a deal. I will have the legal team draft the contract and send it over by 5 o'clock today." That promotion was finally mine, and let me tell you, it tasted sweeter than I ever could have imagined. Returning to the Brennan Industries building the following Monday felt like a massive victory lap. When I walked onto the executive floor on my first day, wearing a sharp new suit, the entire marketing department actually stood up and applauded. I didn't waste a single second soaking in the glory. I rolled up my sleeves and dove straight into the work, dismantling the corrupt systems the previous director had put in place and rebuilding the team's morale from the ground up. My first major initiative as senior director was something deeply personal. I partnered Brennan Industries with a national medical safety organization to launch a massive, nationwide public awareness campaign about the extreme dangers of unlicensed cosmetic procedures and counterfeit injectables. I didn't hire an actor or a model for the campaign. I used my own story. I used the terrifying, unflattering photos of my paralyzed face that I had taken on my bathroom floor that horrific morning. I stood in front of the high-definition cameras and spoke about the devastating reality of medical spa negligence. I talked about the physical pain, the emotional trauma, and the legal loopholes that allowed unqualified people to handle dangerous toxins. The campaign was a monumental success. It went viral across every major social media platform, but this time for all the right reasons. It sparked intense debates and actually led to new legislation in 2 states to tighten regulations on cosmetic injectables. At the end of the year, our marketing team swept the industry awards. I stood on a brightly lit stage in a tailored tuxedo, holding 3 crystal trophies, looking out at a crowd of industry leaders giving me a standing ovation. With my new, heavily upgraded salary and the massive civil settlement I had won from the med spa, my financial reality completely transformed. I was no longer the struggling guy who had his college fund stolen. I was wealthy, secure, and ready to put down permanent roots. I hired a top-tier real estate agent named Sarah to find me a home. I wanted something quiet, something beautiful, something entirely my own, far away from the chaotic city center. After weeks of searching through premium listings, Sarah called me on a Friday morning with a highly exclusive property. It was a stunning, modern 4-bedroom house with a sprawling, meticulously landscaped backyard, located in one of the most prestigious suburban neighborhoods in the state. I drove out to see the property on a bright Sunday morning. The house was absolutely perfect. It had a massive chef's kitchen with marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in rivers of natural light, and a master suite that looked like a 5-star luxury hotel. I walked through the empty rooms, listening to my footsteps echo on the hardwood floors, feeling a profound sense of peace. "The backyard is the real selling point," Sarah said, leading me out through the sliding glass doors onto a beautiful stone patio. I stepped outside, taking in the fresh air, looking at the tall privacy fences and the lush green grass. But as I walked toward the edge of the property line to inspect the wooden fence, my blood suddenly ran cold. I stopped dead in my tracks. I looked across the fence at the house right next door. I knew that house. I knew the specific shade of faded blue paint on the window shutters. I knew the shape of the overgrown oak tree in the front yard. I knew the exact crack in the concrete driveway. It was my parents' house, or rather, it used to be. The front lawn, which my father used to obsessively mow every Saturday, was completely dead and brown. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn tight, and hammered deeply into the dry dirt near the mailbox was a massive, bright yellow sign that read, "Foreclosed bank owned." The bank had finally taken it. The crushing weight of Carter's criminal defense lawyer fees, combined with the catastrophic financial ruin of my civil lawsuit, had pushed them completely over the edge. They had lost the very home they had secretly remortgaged to buy Carter his luxury lifestyle. The house they had prioritized over my college fund was gone. I stood on the beautiful stone patio of this million-dollar property, looking at the decaying ruins of the toxic kingdom I had finally escaped from. The absolute poetry of the moment, the sheer cosmic justice of it all, was almost too perfect to believe. It was as if the universe had guided me exactly to this spot to show me the final score. I turned to Sarah, my real estate agent. She looked concerned by my sudden silence. "Is everything okay, Joshua?" she asked. I looked back at the foreclosed house, then at the beautiful home behind me. "Everything is perfect. I will take it. Full asking price. All cash. Let's get the paperwork started today." Moving day was an absolute triumph. I hired a premium moving company to handle every single detail. I stood on the pristine, sweeping driveway of my new estate, holding a cup of premium dark roast coffee, watching a team of professional movers carefully carry my new, expensive furniture through the grand double doors. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and I felt a sense of ownership over my life that I had never experienced before. That is when I saw her, a rusty, beat-up sedan, its exhaust sputtering loudly, pulled up to the curb of the foreclosed house next door. The engine died with a rough clatter. The driver's side door creaked open, and my mother stepped out. I barely recognized the woman standing on the sidewalk. The arrogant, pristine woman who used to wear expensive pearls and host extravagant neighborhood dinner parties to show off her golden child was completely gone. She looked withered, frail, and aged 20 years in the span of 12 months. Her hair, once perfectly dyed and styled, was graying at the roots and pulled back into a messy knot. She was wearing a faded, oversized sweater, and her posture was heavily slumped. She had come to collect the last few boxes of worthless junk the bank had allowed them to leave on the curb before the property went to auction. She bent down to pick up a damp cardboard box. As she stood up, she glanced over at the commotion happening at the luxury estate next door. She saw the moving trucks. She saw the expensive furniture. And then, her eyes locked onto me, standing in the driveway with my coffee. She froze completely. The cardboard box in her hands slipped from her grasp and dropped to the sidewalk, hitting the concrete with a dull thud. Old photo albums and cheap trinkets spilled out onto the dirty street. She walked slowly toward the property line, her steps hesitant, stopping right at the edge of my freshly manicured green lawn. Her eyes darted wildly from my perfectly healthy, expressive face, to the tailored clothes I was wearing, to the massive, stunning house behind me. "Joshua," she whispered. Her voice was trembling violently, carrying a thick mixture of profound shock, exhaustion, and deep, unyielding bitterness. Is this your house?" "It is," I replied calmly, not taking a step toward her. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Her face contorted into an ugly, familiar mask of resentment. The victim mentality that had ruled her entire life flared up instantly. "How could you? Of all the houses in this entire state, you buy the one right next to our ruin? Are you enjoying this? Living here, rubbing your money and your promotion in our faces while we suffer? Your father couldn't handle the stress of the bankruptcy. We are going through a messy divorce. I am living in a cramped, miserable one-bedroom apartment across town. Is this what you wanted?" I looked at her. I searched my chest for a spark of sympathy, a shred of guilt, or even a flash of anger, but I found nothing. I just felt a cold, absolute clarity. The emotional chains she had wrapped around my neck for 32 years were completely shattered. "I am not rubbing anything in your faces, Eleanor," I said, intentionally using her first name to sever the final maternal tie. "I am simply living my life. The exact, beautiful life I built with my own two hands and my own intellect after you and your golden child tried to permanently destroy it. You chose to inject poison into my skin while I slept. I chose to inject truth into the world. You gambled your entire life on a vicious, empty shell of a son, and you lost." She flinched as if I had physically struck her across the face. "We are your family, Joshua. We are your blood. You cannot just erase us." "No," I corrected her, my voice unwavering and hard as steel. "You were my relatives. Biology is nothing but a genetic accident. Family is a choice. A real family does not drain a son's college fund to buy a sports car for a spoiled brat. A family does not clap their hands in delight when you are disfigured and terrified. A family does not hire a cutthroat lawyer to protect a violent attacker and destroy the victim in a courtroom. You made your choice every single day for 3 decades, and now you get to live with the consequences of those choices alone." She stood there, shrinking under the crushing weight of her own undeniable guilt. She looked down at the spilled photo albums on the concrete. "Carter wants to apologize," she said weakly, her voice cracking, grasping at the final, pathetic straws of her delusion. "He was released on parole last week. He has to wear an ankle monitor. He can't get a decent job because of his felony record. He is working the night shift at a customer service call center. He wrote you a letter. Please, Joshua, just read it. I looked at the woman who had enabled my abuser, and I felt absolutely nothing but a mild desire for her to get off my sidewalk. You can tell Carter that he is welcome to send me that letter, I said, turning my back to her. And I might actually open it on the exact day he pays off the remaining $200,000 he owes me in civil restitution from his minimum wage salary. Based on the math, that should take him about 15 years. Have a nice life, Eleanor. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't watch her cry. I walked up my driveway, stepped through the massive front doors of my home, and closed them firmly, shutting out the toxic past forever. The heavy click of the deadbolt locking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. That evening, I hosted my very first dinner party in the new house. The massive chef's kitchen was filled with the incredible smell of roasting garlic, fresh herbs, and expensive wine. The long dining table was surrounded by the people who had truly earned the sacred title of family. Nathan was there, pouring drinks and telling terrible jokes that made everyone groan. Chloe, the brave med spa nurse who had risked her own job and reputation to expose Carter's theft to the police, was sitting next to him, laughing loudly. My brilliant lawyer, the man who had successfully dismantled my parents' toxic financial empire in civil court, was sitting at the head of the table, offering a toast to new beginnings. Even Mr. Brennan had sent a massive, gorgeous bouquet of white orchids with a handwritten card to congratulate me on the new home. The house was filled with warmth, loud, genuine laughter, and pure love. There was no jealousy hiding in the corners. There was no walking on eggshells to appease a golden child. There was no competing for basic human decency. We were just good people enjoying the fruits of hard work and loyalty. Late that night, long after the last guest had hugged me goodbye and driven home, the house settled into a peaceful, heavy quiet. I walked into my master bathroom to get ready for bed. It was a beautiful space, all gleaming white marble, polished glass, and warm, soft lighting. I stood in front of the massive vanity mirror. It was the exact same scenario as that nightmare morning a year ago. A man standing alone in a bathroom, looking at his own reflection. But this time, the reflection belonged entirely to me. I leaned closer to the glass. I looked closely at my face. I raised my eyebrows. Both of them shot up perfectly, the muscles responding instantly to my command. I squeezed my eyes shut, tight and strong, holding them for a second before opening them wide. And then I smiled. It was a massive, genuine, ear-to-ear smile. It wasn't forced. It wasn't practiced for a biofeedback machine. It was pure joy. Every single muscle, every nerve ending worked in perfect, flawless harmony. The movement created deep, highly visible laugh lines around the corners of my eyes and the edges of my mouth. They were the exact wrinkles Carter had tried to violently erase with his stolen poison. He thought he was bringing me down to his pathetic level. He thought he was making us equally handsome by turning me into a paralyzed, drooling monster so he could shine brighter. But all his cruelty did was set the stage for me to rise so incredibly high that my former family could not even see me from the absolute bottom of the miserable pit they dug for themselves. I reached up and gently traced the laugh line near my left eye with my index finger. I earned these lines. They are not flaws. They tell the most beautiful, undeniable story of all. They tell the story of a man who was pushed to the absolute brink, who lost everything in a single morning, and who fought his way back to the top. They tell the story of survival. That brings us to the end of my story. But before you click away to another video, I want to take a moment to talk about the real lesson hidden beneath all the dramatic courtroom battles, the lost college funds, and the corporate promotions. Society places a massive, often suffocating burden on the concept of family. We are heavily conditioned from a very young age to believe that blood is thicker than water. We are taught that we must forgive our relatives infinitely, no matter how terribly they treat us, and that walking away from family is the ultimate moral failure. My terrifying experience taught me the exact opposite. Toxicity does not suddenly get a free pass just because it shares your DNA. Abuse, manipulation, and profound jealousy do not become acceptable just because they happen at a Thanksgiving dinner table instead of a dark alley with a stranger. The most empowering, life-altering decision you will ever make in your life is realizing that you have the absolute, fundamental right to curate the people who have access to your energy and your life. Setting firm boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is a vital act of self-preservation. When you finally stop pouring your soul, your time, and your love into a black hole of people who flat-out refuse to value you, you suddenly have all this incredible positive energy left to build a life you actually love. You get to choose your real family based on respect, loyalty, and mutual support. Never let anyone guilt-trip you into staying in a room where you are treated like a burden instead of a blessing. Your life, your success, and your peace of mind are worth protecting at all costs. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What was your biggest takeaway from my journey? Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone close to you, maybe even a parent or a sibling? Share your perspective and your own stories in the comments below. Or, if you simply agree with the message, just drop the word "good" in the comments so I know you made it to the very end and that these life lessons resonated with you. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.